Welcome back to my first podcast. I'm Lachlan Reed, coming in with a coffee and probably too much optimism, and I'm here with Simon Carver. Today we're getting into personality, what it is, what changes, and why people aren't just stuck being the same old galah forever.
That's a good starting promise, because when people hear personality, they often think, oh, that's just my type, end of story. But the richer view is more human than that. Personality is your usual patterns, yes, but also the emotional machinery underneath, the way you think, the story you tell about who you are, and how all that lands in the social world.
Yeah, exactly. It's not just I'm shy or I'm organized. It's traits, emotions, thinking style, identity, and how you fit with other people all working together. Bit like a trail bike, honestly. Engine, suspension, steering, rider confidence. You can't explain the whole thing by pointing at one bolt and going, there it is, mate.
That's better than some textbooks, to be honest. And in modern psychology, the cleanest map of the trait side is the Big Five. 5 broad tendencies that show up again and again: openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism, which usually means emotional sensitivity, not some old insult from a black and white movie.
Right. Openness is curiosity and imagination. Conscientiousness is discipline and follow-through. Extroversion is energy and outward engagement. Agreeableness is cooperation and warmth. And neuroticism, or emotional sensitivity, is how strongly you react to stress and negative emotion. Simple map, but not simplistic.
And these traits matter in everyday life. They can help predict things like work habits, relationship patterns, leadership style, even some aspects of mental health. Not perfectly, we're talking tendencies, not destiny, but they give you a useful sketch.
That's the key bit. Sketch, not prison sentence. Someone high in conscientiousness might be the person who packs for a trip 3 days early. Someone lower in it might be stuffing socks into a bag while the taxi's outside. But both can learn, both can grow. One just starts with a different default setting.
Yes, and that's where the second half of this gets interesting. Personality is structure, but it's also process. There is a relatively stable side, the patterns that make you recognizably you over time. But there is also development. Research on trait development often points to gradual change across life, especially as people take on roles, responsibilities, stress, recovery, relationships. Life shapes the pattern, not just the other way around.
So you're not reinventing yourself every Tuesday, but you're not set in concrete either. More like wet clay that firms up, then gets reshaped by weather, pressure, a few bad decisions, maybe a breakup, maybe a new job. Sorry, that's a messy analogy. Even a kangaroo could trip over it.
No, it works.
And identity is the bridge here. Traits tell us your usual style. Identity tells us what those patterns mean to you. Two people can both be introverted, for example, but one says, I'm thoughtful and observant, while the other says, I'm broken and left out. Same rough tendency, very different lived experience.
And social meaning matters too. Families, teams, cultures, they all hand you labels. Reliable one, difficult one, natural leader, problem child. Those labels can sink into your bones if you're not careful.
So if we put it plainly, personality is your recurring way of being, built from traits, emotional systems, cognition, identity, and social context. Stable enough to matter, flexible enough to evolve. And that matters because if personality has both structure and movement, then change isn't fake. It's part of the design.
Beautifully put. So if you've ever said, this is just how I am, maybe keep that sentence on a shorter leash. You do have a style, but your style can still learn a few new tricks.
So why does change so often happen through a rough patch instead of on a nice, calm Sunday afternoon? That's the old story, really. Across myths, therapy, faith traditions, even leadership training, transformation tends to have a shape. Stability, then disruption, then searching, then some kind of integration, then growth.
Yep, order, chaos, exploration, integration, growth. Nice tidy list for a very untidy experience. Life's humming along, then bang, job loss, injury, heartbreak, burnout, a dream falling apart. Suddenly, the map doesn't match the road.
And that pattern shows up in ancient stories for a reason. The hero leaves the familiar world, enters uncertainty, gets tested, and comes back changed. It's dramatic in myth, but in real life, it can be as ordinary as becoming a parent, moving cities, or realizing at 38 that you've built a life that looks impressive and feels dead.
Oof, yeah. And psychology has different languages for that same basic thing. Psychoanalytic thinkers talked about unconscious conflict, defenses, symbols, the parts of us we don't fully see. Jung added archetypes and individuation, basically becoming more fully yourself by facing what's been shoved in the shadows.
Then humanistic psychology comes in with a gentler voice and says growth needs the right conditions: honesty, safety, real dialogue. Carl Rogers had that beautiful formula. Change needs awareness, acceptance, and responsibility. Not just insight, not just, I see my pattern. Also acceptance of what's true and responsibility for what comes next.
And the existential crew say, well, the deep stuff is unavoidable. Mortality, freedom, isolation, meaning. Cheerful bunch. But they're onto something. People often change when suffering forces the question, what am I going to do with this? Frankl's big point was that meaning matters, maybe more than comfort.
Exactly. Not that pain is automatically noble. Sometimes pain is just pain. But when a person can connect suffering to responsibility, to who they choose to be inside it, then identity can reorganize.
Now, here's where the brain science sneaks in without getting all lab coat weird. A mainstream idea in neuroscience is predictive processing, often linked with thinkers like Carl Friston. The short version: your brain is constantly making bets about what's happening and what's about to happen. It's trying to reduce uncertainty.
Yes, the brain doesn't just passively receive the world, it's forecasting. And when reality doesn't match the forecast, you get prediction error, a mismatch. That mismatch can feel like confusion, stress, anxiety, even frustration. Negative emotion often rides along when the brain's model is failing.
So crisis isn't just emotionally hard, it's informationally rude. Reality barges in and says, good on ya, but your old model's busted. Then you've got two choices, roughly. Deny the mismatch and cling harder, or update the model.
And updating is the heart of transformation. You explore, you test new behaviors, you revise the story. Maybe you learn, I'm not the naturally gifted one who never struggles. I'm the person who can adapt. That is a different identity, not just a new mood.
Positive emotion can fit in here too. In this framework, feeling good often signals progress toward a goal, or that things are becoming more coherent again. Not perfect, just more integrated. The world starts making sense. You start making sense to yourself.
Which is why transformation usually feels messy in the middle. It's not a clean upgrade. It's the old self not quite working and the new self not quite built, like renovating a house while still living in it.
And stepping on nails the whole time. But that's the point. Uncertainty isn't always a sign you're failing. Sometimes it's the workshop where change is happening. All right, so how do you actually use all this without turning your journal into a philosophy swamp? In therapy, coaching, leadership, sport, anywhere people are trying to perform or cope, this transformation model gives you a practical lens. Instead of asking only, what's wrong with me, you ask, what stage am I in?
That's a powerful shift. If someone is in crisis, the goal may not be instant confidence. It may be naming the chaos clearly. If they're exploring, the work might be trying new habits or new interpretations. If they're integrating, it's about consistency, helping the new pattern stick.
In therapy, that might mean spotting a repeated story. I always ruin things. Then rewriting it more truthfully. Not fake sunshine, more like, I panic under stress, but I've survived hard things before and I can learn better responses. Same life, better map.
Narrative rewriting matters because identity often follows story. If I keep telling my life as one long failure reel, I will behave differently than if I see it as a difficult apprenticeship. Again, not spin, not denial, a more useful and honest frame.
Coaching and leadership work the same way. Say a manager hits conflict and thinks, I'm not leadership material. Maybe. Or maybe they're in the chaos stage of becoming less avoidant and more clear. The discomfort isn't proof they shouldn't lead. It might be the exact training load that develops the skill.
And in sport, this is almost impossible to miss. An athlete hits a plateau, or gets injured, or loses badly. Stability breaks. Then comes experimentation. New training plan, mental skills, recovery routines, maybe a different relationship to pressure. Over time, if the learning is integrated, performance can improve, not despite the setback, but partly through it.
Yeah, imagine a fighter or runner who used to rely on raw intensity. Then a loss exposes the gap. They start working on attention, emotional regulation, maybe how they interpret nerves. Instead of, I'm freaking out, it becomes, my system's ramping up for action. Tiny shift, huge difference under pressure.
There are some very grounded tools here. 1. Active reflection. Sit with what happened and ask clarifying questions before you leap to advice or self-attack. 2. Responsibility. What is mine to do now? 3. Daily incremental improvement. That simple 1% idea. Small gains are less glamorous than reinvention, but they are usually more real.
And maybe nick a page from Rogers. Awareness, acceptance, responsibility. First, see it. Then stop wasting energy pretending it's not there. Then choose your next move. That's clean. That's usable on a Wednesday.
So here's a little closing exercise. Ask yourself 3 questions. First, what chaos am I facing right now? Second, what lesson might be hidden inside it? And third, what identity could be emerging if I meet this well?
Those are belters. Because sometimes the mess in front of you isn't just wreckage. It might be a rough draft of the next version of you. Not polished, not pretty, but real.
And that's probably the heart of today's episode. Personality isn't fixed stone. It's pattern plus possibility.
Nice one. Thanks for hanging out with us, folks. Simon, always a pleasure.
Likewise, Lachlan. See you next time.
Catch you later.